Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Today we'll take a little bit of a look experimentally at one of those stats that's always been interesting me and might be a little bit difficult to get your head around. And we're talking about dispersion. Two reasons. First of all, I was really curious what the actual impact of the various modifiers for dispersion is. And second of all, once again, recently the Republik had her Sigma rating changed, and I wanted to know what that is as well. So why are we looking at the Kansas then? Well, for a good reason, because the Kansas, as a Tier 8 American battleship, both has the precise aiming skill, it has a module slot where you can fit the dispersion module in, and the historical camo on the Kansas also gives better dispersion. So what I wanted to find out is A, how does dispersion work, and B, what is the impact of all these items? So let's begin with the first part, with how does dispersion actually work. And well, obviously we can't really determine it that easily, but what we can do is look over at PC. Now we don't have any guarantee that this is implemented the same way as PC because a lot of the mechanics in Blitz are somewhat simplified. I do apologize for the occasional birds. I'm in Australia, birds are noisy, and it's bloody warm, so I'm keeping the windows open. So don't mind the birds. But yeah, what was I saying? PC, yes, not all the mechanics are ported over to Blitz. But for example, the armor angling has been ditched in terms of, in favor of simplicity and faster gameplay. But I figured if I was a developer and I was tasked with re-implementing an existing mechanic more or less, and dispersion does exist because we obviously have modules that deal with it and ship skills that deal with it. I would probably have a look at how they're doing it in the existing code base, and if you have to reinvent wheels, at least take a good look at prior art. So from the how-to or internals video, and I'll leave a link in the description on how this works in World of Warships PC, we can determine a couple of things. So for now, for starters, there's a dispersion ellipsis. And that is effectively the maximum area within which your shells will land. And ideally, they will not land anywhere, but they will actually strike the target ship that you're aiming at in the process of doing so. Now, the further away you are, and I think PC calculates that per turret, and it might be that Blitz does that as well, because I have seen turrets have vastly different dispersions. So I would assume that's the same thing here. The closer you are, the smaller that ellipsis is. The further away you are, the larger it is. Because, shooting at long range is difficult. I mean, historically, if you had to find your range, you had to actually spot where your shells were landing. And people were doing all kinds of tricks, like range finders, obviously, but also things like colored shells. And the Italians even had a doctrine that no two battleships were allowed to target one target because it would have been too difficult to distinguish which shell splashes were yours and which shell splashes were the other ship that's shooting, and then it's more difficult to actually hit anything. The Japanese were firing dyed shells so that they would splash in different colors and make it easier for them to find out who was shooting what. Anyway, so the further away you are, the bigger the area in which your shells can land. Now, the maximum dispersion at your maximum range is, well, that diameter of the ellipsis, but on the short side, pretty much. And that brings us to where your shells are landing within that ellipsis. And that is where the Sigma rating comes in. Now, the Sigma comes from the normal distribution statistically. So if you look at a normal distribution curve, you could kind of understand the higher Sigma or lower Sigma either way around. And that might have been the case also because I think in World of Tanks, a lower Sigma is better. I'm not sure if that's or worse. I can't really remember. But let's have a look how the Sigma is explained here. So you see this sort of scatter plot of where your shells are landing. Most of the shells are landing in the center of where you actually want them to be. But a lot of shells are landing all over the place outside as well. So in World of Warships, a higher Sigma rating is better. And you can see that very clearly on a 2 sigma rating. Most of your shells are clustering around the center of where you're aiming, and some of them are well, going wide. Whereas on a 1 sigma rating, the shells are almost equally distributed across the ellipses. Now, going back to the Republik used to have a 2 sigma targeting. So the left side would have been the pre-nerf Republik, and the right side is the post-nerf Republik. So that's what we're dealing with. That brings us now to well, the next factor of how are we actually going to measure and set that up in testing. So for the very first, we're going to be shooting at our target ship as usual, but for the first test, we're going to create a baseline. So I have a commander in here who is it's George Dewey with the extra precise aiming skills, just such that I have enough precise aim for the salvos. But other than that, none of these factors actually affects or impacts how the precise aim really functions. So for now, we don't have any module in slot 1, we don't have any camouflage, and we're not going to use the precise aiming skill. And we're just going to be shooting at a South Carolina at 10 kilometer range. So that's sort of what that looks like. It is angled because I did want it to be somewhat realistic, but we're just aiming at the center point, and we're just firing the salvos, and I will count how many salvos have been fired, so how many shells have been fired and how many shells have hit. Now I will obviously exclude the kill salvo, because it might have possibly hit 4 or 5 shells, but 2 shells were enough to kill the target ship, so only 2 shells get counted. So I'm only doing that provided that the target ship actually has enough hit points. So if we're looking at the data coming out of this exercise, I have done multiple runs, and with a stock dispersion, so no camo, no precise aiming module, no precise aiming skill, we get a 34.56, so roundly about a 35% hit rate. So at a 10 kilometer range against an angled target of that rough size, you're going to get a third of your shells on target, pretty much. So how does that change if we use the precise aiming skill? Well, let's have a quick look at the precise aiming skill and see what it can do. So the Kansas gets the precise aiming 1, and the precise aiming 1 says it increases the gun accuracy by 25%. What does that mean? Well, what I suspect it means is that it decreases the size of the ellipses. It could also mess with the sigma values. We don't know that, but that would be these will be 2 possible ways of how this happens. So firing with the precise aiming active, what is the impact once again if we're doing the exact same set? And without camo, without the aiming module, we are seeing an improvement of hits from 34.5 to 50.69% of hits. So instead of hitting every 3rd shell, we're hitting every 2nd shell almost. So that is a big jump. That is a 15% jump easily in precision just from using the precise aiming module. So how does that then compare to the other things? Because the other 2 things that we can do is we can go over to the equipment and put the main battery mod 3 in there. Now the main battery mod 3 says it decreases the dispersion by 7%. And once again, I think this is the ellipse that is the size of the ellipses. It could possibly be that the precise aim is messing with your sigmas, but it's hard to tell. So if we'll put that in there, and we're also going to put the historical camouflage on, because that gives us another maximum main battery shell dispersion of -4%. So now we have these 2 options on there, and once again we're doing the exact same experiment with the precise aiming skill active, but on top of that now with the other two factors applied, and the result says we get 58% accuracy in this scenario from it. So the impact of the precise aim skill alone is roughly double of the impact of the both the historical camouflage and the dispersion module in slot 1. So the skill is even just the level 1 skill is really reasonably helping with getting that precise aim on target, and that is probably why some like a captain like George Dewey is also so powerful on the American non-historical battleship line. So yeah, there you got. Obviously, this really depends on your situation. Depends if your target is broadsiding. Depends if your target is moving. Depends what size your target is. And then once again, once the shells actually get on target, it depends if they're doing damage or not. So this is not necessarily an indicator for raw damage, but it is certainly a very important indicator. And I was quite surprised to see that even the precise aim 1 is doing such a big difference, is making such a big difference between not using it and using it. So there you go. Now we learned a little bit about dispersion. Once again, a lot of this is speculation because obviously I don't know how the game works internally. I haven't seen the code, but it may be a useful bit of information. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.